Welcome to the Lonesome Sunday Podcast. And now your hosts, David and Cory.
Hello, and welcome to the Lonesome Sunday Podcast.
I'm David.
I'm Cory.
And today we're talking about movie remakes. The good, the bad, and why they should or should not be done.
They're getting increasingly more popular in the world because they are making lots of money in the box office, so why not keep going? So
yeah, I mean, there's definitely some that are definitely making money in the box office. There's others that are flopping like crazy. Like, let's talk about Ben-Hur, for instance. We'll come to that, I'm sure. Yeah. But, sequels and remakes are definitely dominating the box office in every capacity. We're not going to talk about sequels today, but we are going to talk about remakes. And why some of these shouldn't be done, because, there are actually some good ideas. To kind of give a little bit of forethought here about kind of why remakes, it's okay to do a remake. Just before we dive into it, I think you have to understand that it's not just Hollywood that's been doing this. It's been plays and books throughout the eons have done remakes.
Yeah.
Most famously, William Shakespeare. A lot of his work is actually based off Chaucer and other guys, and he takes their plays and he redistributes them for his own purposes.
Well, yeah,
not every one of them, but for a lot of Romeo and Juliet is actually based off a poem, for instance.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite jokes from the Reduced Shakespeare Company, who did the complete works of William Shakespeare Abridged, was that he had all of his ideas for comedies. But they were all just the same idea for comedy, pretty much.
It's a lot of recycled material.
Recycled over and over again.
Yep, definitely so. It's and that's a common theme. And I actually had when I took Shakespeare back in college. It was someone brought up the point that it's a lot like comic book movies today. It's just that Shakespeare drew off sources that he had and made a movie, and so he based it off other plays. And that's kind of this is just kind of an intro that we're getting at here, is that this is not an uncommon practice, and it's not necessarily just modern Hollywood. But with that being said, there's no denying that some of these are absolute successes.
Yes,
for a reason. Yeah,
and there are some that are absolute bombs. For a reason.
Definitely for a reason.
Because there are some movies that should not be touched that get remakes, and then there are some that probably wouldn't be as successful today if they hadn't been remade. So
yeah, and there's also others that they probably should be remade, but the execution in it was just so poorly handled.
Yeah,
that they lost some of the character of the original, or they lost just in sense of what made it good in the first place.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so let's get started talking about it.
Yeah. What's your first one you got for us?
Well, I have a big list of movie remakes just because there are so many to choose from. It's hard to narrow it down to 2 or 3 for me personally.
Yeah.
So on my best list, these aren't in any particular order. They're just movies that I was like, oh yeah, that's a really good remake. At the top of my list is The Thing. Remaking The Thing and The Thing from Another World. So, there's a remake between the original in this case.
So it's a lot like King Kong, how there was the 1930s and 1970s, and you had the Peter Jackson one of the 2000s.
And now you have Kong Skull Island.
Yeah, of course. So you just keep remaking.
Yep, but with The Thing, to me it falls into the category of movies that are trying to do something new with its source material.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about the John Carpenter 80s.
Yeah, I've seen the John Carpenter version of this. I actually left The Thing off my list because I knew it was a remake, but I had never seen any of the originals. And so I as much as I love this movie, and I definitely can talk to you about this movie, I don't have any background to talk about, so I left it off my list.
That's fair.
Yeah,
and I've seen one of the older ones. I saw one of the ones from the 50s in black and white on Turner Classic one night, and I don't really remember it.
Yeah.
It's one of those, did I enjoy it at the time? Yeah, it was fine, but it's not the John Carpenter's The Thing.
John Carpenter's version is pretty darn good. Let's just start there. I remember...
Which is amazing, because it bombed in the box office.
Oh, really? I didn't know that was part of the film history on it.
Yeah, when it came out, it was insulted by critics for being a remake. Huh. And it bombed in the box office. It's only become successful in like years later.
So it's kind of becoming a cult film, more or less.
But it's a great movie, and what it did with it, the source material was more just like, oh, there's this alien who's out getting us, and they warped that into the psychological thriller that is the John Carpenter version.
Okay.
So, like the paranoia of who can you trust is any one of us could be this monster. I don't remember that being in the original.
You don't remember that being in the original? That's
but
interesting.
At the same time, again, the original to me wasn't memorable.
Yeah.
Of course, I saw it when I was young.
Well, it's interesting that like the paranoia and things like that, and since this is like based off a 1950s film when like the Red Scare's going on and other things like that, like who's the communist? It's kind of also in that same vein since this is coming out like in the 1980s at the late part of the Cold War. So a little bit of like the theme there. I imagine there's probably like if I go back and watch it, there's probably some overlapping.
So, yeah, probably.
Yeah,
but it's hard to argue that The Thing isn't a great movie. So,
some of the shots in it are gorgeous, and
special effects are state of the art,
especially for the time. Like, oh my gosh,
they still look good.
Not to mention, it's just a very compelling story. I'm not one for horror, but Zeke made me watch this one, and I know Zeke is not a big horror fan either. So when Zeke recommends a horror movie to me, I take a lot of time and I go, okay, it's probably not that bad. So, and he got this one, and like, it's terrifying. Don't get me wrong, but it is definitely more of a thriller more than a horror, and so you're just sitting there going, "Oh man!" the entire time you're watching this.
Who can I trust?
Who can I trust? Yeah, it was funny because my dog just kept looking at me the entire time during that movie. So,
can you trust your dog?
I
can you trust Joey?
It's a good question. It really is a good.
Let's face it, Hazel's the one you have to watch out for.
Exactly.
Ow! Oh. Sorry about that. My headphones caught.
Your headphone got caught there?
Yeah.
Oh, man. I hope that didn't just bust your ears out or anything like that.
Oh. I'll turn that down for everyone else.
So I have a couple of movies on my list, too. We'll get back to you.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
I figured we would jump to you next.
Yeah. But one of the biggest ones that, like, I was going to mention as one of my bests was one of my favorite films, The Departed.
Yep.
This is not like a straight remake. Like I would probably call it like The Thing is to The Thing. The Departed is based off a movie called Infernal Affairs, which was made in Hong Kong in the early 2000s. It's a very, very good film. So much that Scorsese said, yeah, I want to make that and Americanize it.
Yep.
And so like this has got a star-studded cast. It finally won Scorsese an Oscar. And it's also introduced some new things to American film in the process, not only from like just bringing in some of this Chinese and Hong Kong film culture, but also to the ideas like just simple things that we take for granted today in movies. It was the first major movie to have texting in it.
Really?
Yeah. Not a lot of people realize that. I remember learning that in film class, and it's just one of those things you take for granted from the time that this film came out. Like, Martin Sheen pulls out his phone and sees the text message, and they're exchanging the text messages back and forth. That had not been done by a major studio yet.
That's really interesting. I've never heard that before.
Yeah, like I said, it's one of those things we take for granted, and we've expanded it so much today.
Yeah.
Where we have like the drop screens now to show text messages, and Scorsese just found this very simple way of doing it, where it's like, yeah, we're just going to pull the phone out and just show what you got on the screen, and then you're going to close it and put it back in your pocket.
Yeah. Well, that's a way to do it, so...
Yeah, I mean, no one has found the correct answer yet.
No.
But this was a new thing to general American audiences. So that's one of my favorites, and I definitely think it's a good remake, not because it's just a Scorsese film, but because it introduced a piece of culture from another country, Americanized it, to where you have some familiarity with that other culture just a little bit, which I think makes it a solid remake.
Yeah. And it's definitely just a great film overall. It's been a while since I've watched it, but I do love The Departed. I spotted as soon as I saw it.
Yeah, it's good. It was the film that made me fall in love with Scorsese. Yeah, that was my big like, hey, you need to watch this guy kind of moment. Is when I started watching him when I was about 18.
For me, that one was Gangs of New York, but that's a little different.
A little bit different movie. I know you got a couple of lists that movie on your list that meet that same vein.
Yes. For me, like, kind of falling into that same group of, like, introducing a film from a different culture, I have on my list The Ring, the horror movie from the early 2000s.
Yeah, with the
remake of Ringu, which is also horrifying, but I actually think the American version's better.
Really? Okay.
I do. But then I also have on here The Birdcage.
Now, this is one that, like, I don't think a lot is a remake, but yeah, you're right. It is based...
Le Cage aux Folles.
Yeah, it's based off a French play.
Yep, and, like, it was a French play, French film, there's a musical, like, and so the Robin Williams, Nathan Lane, Gene Hackman remake.
Yeah. The last name was going to escape me, but I know exactly what I'm talking about. kind of thing.
I think the other major person, that was Diane Lane. I think that was who it was. Anyway, but it's just it's hilarious.
Oh my god, it's
so funny. But it's one of those things that's kind of hard to talk about because it's also taking in from different cultures and translating it to American
very
audiences.
much American audiences. Yeah.
And for The Birdcage to come out when it came out, it was like mid-90s.
Mid-90s,
and it was
yeah.
living up gay culture. It was also coming out around the same time as like Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, and To Wong Fu. So there's a lot of like drag queen movies coming out at the time, but this was one of those that kind of revolutionized like the more of the comedy aspect from France.
Yeah,
because it's very, very farcical.
Oh, it's incredibly high farce, which just plays up to Robin Williams and Nathan Lane's acting abilities.
Oh, yeah.
Like you wouldn't believe.
And their chemistry is just amazing through the whole film.
And one of the things I remember about that movie is the little things in that movie that make it the funniest parts. Like, the big laughs are so good, don't get me wrong. But the little laughs where Nathan Lane is sitting on, where he walks out in a suit and they're like, oh, okay, is he going to be able to pull this whole, like, acting straight thing off? And he sits down and he crosses his legs and he's wearing pink socks. And they go... And your
he
socks,
just like slowly pulls his leg down.
Like, and they're like, and your socks, and it's like, well, one does want a dash of color. It's just like, what? And that's so played so well, and two actors who are known for being extremely big characters being so subtly funny, you know? It's so good.
It's one of my favorite comedies of all time. It's just so funny. But, like, again, though, it took something from another culture to bring it to American audiences, and that's really one of the things that you should do for a remake, is trying to, like, introduce it to a new audience.
Yeah, I agree.
And there's a lot of movies that are just, like, trying to, like, rehash or, like, redo things of, like, oh, this was popular, so let's remake it again to make the money, but...
Yeah, no, there's definitely movies like that.
But when you're trying to... do it out of love for a movie, to like introduce it to, oh, I love this movie, here, let me share it with you in a way that you can understand.
Yeah,
I think that's great for cinema.
I totally agree with that. I think remaking for the purpose of an art project is something awesome. I agree with that. There are movies where that does work. Movies where that doesn't work, like, we also know where those exist too. One of that I have on my list is Planet of the Apes.
I have that on my list too.
Oh my goodness.
That's on my bad list. We're talking about the Tim Burton one, right?
Yeah, we're talking about the Tim Burton one.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't want to get into the James Franco one because, like, that's got some debatability because, like, they're trying to reboot a franchise in a little bit different sense.
They're rebooting a franchise, but they're also telling a new story.
Yeah.
And that falls into the loose remake, prequel, sequel kind of category.
Yeah. And so we're talking about a film franchise that was made, during the Cold War originally, with, one of the best sci-fi writers of all time working on this. Rod Serling was... when he made it. Yeah. Yeah, it's, Twilight Zone-esque. You could just feel it's a Twilight Zone episode. And the massive conversations that are just sitting around this one movie about evolution. And you have the nuclear wars and, like, the temperament of man. Just, like, all of this just combined in this piece of just genius writing and just compelling sci-fi work. Then you have the Tim Burton version.
Where it's, I just want to do a sci-fi war epic.
Yeah, sci-fi war epic, and we're going, since I'm working with Fox, I'm going to use Fox's, Planet of the Apes, and I'm going to try to modernize it, which doesn't quite play for a late 90s, early 2000s audience.
See, there's a lot of debate in the original there's nothing in the remake.
Yeah.
It's just, oh, there's a bad ape who wants to hurt people because they're people.
Yep, and it is still a totally different story, but like it gives you nothing with like what the original is with the nuclear war and the chaos.
I think that was the first movie with Marky Mark that I saw.
That was your introduction to Mark Wahlberg.
Yep.
Well, I'm glad we got to talk about The Departed before we got to this.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's when I learned he was a good actor.
Right.
Have you heard about the bees?
Oh my god.
How they're dying?
How the bees are dying? Oh my goodness. What do you think about that, kids? No, we don't want to kill you, ma'am.
Thanks, Marky Mark. You're the best.
Marky Mark, an actor who needs a good director immediately.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, Planet of the Apes is definitely one that's just, it doesn't work.
No, it doesn't. And for that one, it's none of the actors' fault. I think it's just the writing and the direction that they went with it.
Yeah, I think that there's just some things that are just not working, just not playing. This one actually is a weird one because it doesn't really fall into any of the categories that we were pre-discussing about what makes a good and a bad remake and why it's good. Like, this one doesn't fall into the category of
It could fall into the category of reintroducing a concept. However, I think I've on mine I put that on my reasons not to do a remake into the quick cash-ins on name list.
Yeah, I feel like that it falls more into that category,
which is like I slashed reintroducing badly.
Reintroducing badly. Like this one, it's a good thing to introduce things to new generations and other things from other cultures. But when you do a bad job like this, because it's just poor execution, you can just completely flop in a heartbeat. And that's where I'm saying it doesn't quite fall into those good categories we were talking about, even though it's kind of got like the good intentions with it.
One that's on my list that is similar. I'm going on to my bad list for this one, since we've started on the bad list.
Go ahead. I was just going to jump all over the place all
day. So on that kind of side of reintroducing badly or bad remakes, Psycho.
And this is the Vince Vaughn version.
The Vince Vaughn version, where it's a shot-for-shot remake of the masterpiece Hitchcock version.
Oh man, I just can only imagine like Hitchcock just finding out about this project and just like
rolling in his grave,
just turning over and over again, just like
it's one of those.
What do they do?
How did they like? Gus Van Sant can direct well, and he can make good movies. There's a reason why he got the approval to remake Psycho.
Yeah, you're not going to hand it over to nobody.
Yeah, so I want to know what happened in the pitch meeting of, oh, I want to do a remake of Psycho. Oh, okay, so you're going to do all these new creative things with it? No. Shot-for-shot remake. New actors in color.
Yeah, I almost feel like that's a producer going, man, this movie's a classic, man. Like, we need to remake this thing.
But we don't want to stray too far from the mold.
Yeah, kind of thing where they didn't want to take any risks, but they were like, maybe we can reintroduce it to an audience off of sheer color, just to make it more accessible. Because I've told you about my friends who don't watch black and white movies because they're like, oh no, I just can't watch black and white. And it's like, maybe like
the world's in color. How can I watch something when there's only two colors in the world?
Yeah, right. Which we're gonna have a whole nother film discussion on that day when we get into black and white movies. But this one, I feel like that was almost like the producer's pitch on this was like, this makes it accessible for everyone, kind of thing. What it really doesn't help its case at all.
Especially because you can't really compare the casts. Because the original cast, that is what made that movie work. Like, they were all fairly nobodies. And now you have Vince Vaughn.
Yeah.
As Norman Bates. And
it's just a mess, yeah.
He's a comedy actor. Like, he can do some serious moments.
He can turn some things every now and then. But yeah, you're right, he's a comedy actor. I mean, when I think of Vince Vaughn movies, I think of Dodgeball. I think of...
Swingers.
I think of The Internship. I think of him being goofy.
That said, last couple of movies he's turned out, he was in Hacksaw Ridge, and he was fantastic in that. He was like the sergeant, like leading the company, and he was fantastic in this like super serious role. And Brawl in Cell Block 99, I haven't seen it yet, but I've heard nothing but great things about his performance.
And, sometimes it's like, just because you're a comedy actor doesn't mean you can't act.
Yeah, again, Robin Williams.
Robin Williams is a perfect example of that. But, like, with that being said, like, someone like Vince Vaughn, he has a specific type that we're all very aware of him with. So, like, if he's going
He plays the asshole.
Yeah, he plays the asshole comedy guy. And it works for him in a lot of ways with his type. If he's going to do a dramatic work, it's got to be, like, I feel like almost with the perfect director, with a lot of research in the role. Something, like, to balance him out perfectly.
Yeah.
Because, like, and that's how you get a good performance like he has in Hacksaw Ridge, where he's working well. With the people he has going on, and there's a lot going on there.
In that movie, he's playing an asshole,
and
so it's
still
type.
his type, but it's now finding a different genre for his type. Yeah,
and it's hard to do that because you're supposed to feel for Norman Bates until the end.
Yeah,
so
and that's exactly how the movie works, and that's why it's a psychological thriller. You know, and it's very Hitchcock. That is the Hitchcock movie when we all think of Hitchcock, and it's because that is him. It's the playing on your mind the entire time.
All right, I'm gonna jump back to my good list real quick, if that's cool with you.
That's fine with me.
All right, one of the other genre groups of wanting to do a remake that I have on my list is you have a new idea that you want to share, or you want to you have a new vision for the story, or you want to tell it differently. And for that, I have on my list The Fly.
Okay, I want to hear why.
Okay.
Tell me what's going on here.
Have you seen the original The Fly?
I have not seen the original. I have seen the
Cronenberg remake with Goldblum.
Yeah, I've seen that one.
So the original The Fly is very, very similar in concept of it's a scientist who merges himself with a fly when trying to teleport.
Okay.
And so it's the same exact story, but the original is more of a mystery. What happened to the scientist?
Yeah.
The remake is body horror. Here, we're going to show you what happened to the scientist. Instead of it just being a twist at the end.
Yeah.
Where his head's a giant fly head, and then it just zooms over to the spider web in the corner. Help me! Help me! That's what that's from.
Okay, yeah.
Is the scientist's head on a fly body in the corner. Help me! That's the original The Fly. The Cronenberg remake is body horror to the max. We're going to show you every step of his evolution into this brindlefly monster. And it's horrifying.
Oh, it's gross.
So gross, and it's amazing.
Yeah, no, it is a movie that makes you feel uncomfortable from moment one. It's
Gina Davis giving birth to a maggot.
Yeah, it's oh my gosh, it's just every little piece of that movie when I watched it was
so visceral. You can just see it and feel it and hear it. It's so well done. It's the same as The Thing, where the special effects make that movie work.
Yes, it does, and that's coming off just a great period of the 1980 horror classics that just came out of that. And that one's one of them. Yep, and it's a brilliant.
And a lot of them are remakes.
Yes,
and so the thing is when you can remake something well and you have a new way to tell something, why not? There are some people who will say the original Fly is a cinema classic. How could you touch it? But then. This is how you touch it. This is how you do it. You tell something in a new way and with a new director's vision.
I hear what you're saying. Yeah, no, I feel like a lot of times when you hear something's being remade. Now, don't get me wrong. There are examples where you go, "That is a terrible idea. Why are you doing that?" Yep. Ben-Hur. But there are other examples. Like you're talking about with The Fly here. The Fly is it's a movie that was very distance-wise in time. It was removed very well. And then you had so many new elements that you can throw into it with technology and your storytelling. You have a much more dynamic story that you can tell just to the modernization of the way that film had evolved and technology had evolved and the way that special effects had evolved.
Exactly.
And you have a new ability to tell a great story. Yeah. Another example of that, and I'll show you one of my good ones here, is not necessarily just the technology, but the changing of a period and using actors to tell the story better.
Okay.
And I'm going to use an example of two films that are both very good. So like both, when I make this argument about one film being better than the other, there's actually very good reasons to say that both are very good. But I'm talking about True Grit.
Okay.
True Grit is a fantastic film. Both versions are wonderful. It is a cowboy classic from back in the day when cowboy movies, Gunsmoke, Bonanza. I know those aren't movies, but that is that era of, like, you know, when they're talking about in Toy Story how Woody's the most popular doll on the planet. That is that era of film. It is like the superhero movies of the day were the cowboy films back then.
It's the one that won John Wayne an Oscar.
It won John Wayne an Oscar. To that point, John Wayne is John Wayne throughout that entire film.
Are you saying he's not Rooster Cogburn?
I'm saying he's John Wayne. And there's nothing wrong with watching John Wayne.
John Wayne is a fantastic John Wayne.
He does John Wayne so well, and he will always do John Wayne so well, forever and ever, amen. You know, he's in heaven right now, you know, ordering a drink, talking to pilgrims right now. Like, it's just the truth. But, yeah. But the other side of that is that, like, with the remake, you get a totally different movie. And not one just from the feel, because the feel's still there, but, like, with the acting in that, you have two really good actors, and Jeff Bridges and Matt Damon just doing a fantastic job of telling the story. And Jeff Bridges takes Rooster Cogburn and gives him a character like you wouldn't believe. It's it's not just Jeff Bridges, like John Wayne just did John Wayne. Like, Jeff Bridges does a very good complex character, dives into who this guy is, this kind of outlaw lawman kind of scenario, the drinking, the being a little off his hinges a little bit, like cranky old man kind of character. It just gives so much more dynamic to this film, and I think that's a pretty good argument for one of the or I feel like that is the argument for why the modern True Grit has a little bit more merit as a film versus the older True Grit. But that's not to take away from the older True Grit, because it is a good film too. Yeah. It is, I mean, without a doubt. Otherwise you wouldn't.
You can make the case of which film is better, but they're both good in their own aspects.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I also feel like the other reason you want to bring a film like True Grit back is because the Western genre died.
It did.
It died, and we now have just a handful of Western films today. When they come out, they're very, very, like, we grip them. Django, for example, is one of them.
Django is fantastic.
We grip Django very, very hard because it's so uncharacteristic to everything else that's being made in Hollywood, because it is from a dead genre.
On that same front, the remake of The Magnificent Seven.
Exactly.
I'm a massive fan of the original. I have, like, the Magnificent Seven collection. Like, the original Magnificent Seven is a remake in and of itself of Seven Samurai.
Yep, it's based off a Japanese film. Yes.
Yep, and so it's a remake of a remake, like, with the new one. And I really liked the remake. I went into it going, okay,
we're gonna remake the Magnificent Seven here. Yeah.
My one complaint is that it took getting to the credits to hear the theme song, but they did a good job of making the new characters for the story unique. Like, it's not a direct remake. They have, like, newer characters. They have a newer story to tell. It's the same story of, like, oh, we're these people who are going to go and save this town, and there's only 7 of us.
Yeah.
But they've updated some of the characters a little bit. They kept some of the character flaws. They added some new ones, and they told a bigger story. They elaborated on it and made it a much bigger war scene at the end. But it's modern Hollywood. You got to have the big action scene at the end.
You got to have the effects. You got to, because you have it. That's part of the reason.
To me, I think that was the worst part of the movie.
Yeah, isn't it interesting how that works out nowadays?
Like, it's amazing that in this big action movie, the character-driven stuff is the best part, right?
Oh yeah, no, of course. But at least it keeps, like, to the themes, to what the story is, and it holds true to that kind of evolution. which is important.
Yeah. And to go into a completely different direction, I'm gonna just jump into one on my best list. And
Okay.
It's gonna be like, I'm just gonna talk shortly on this one. This is a new vision kind of thing. I'm gonna talk about the Stepford Wives, the remake of the Stepford Wives. I love this movie. It's not good. Like, the original is a classic. This is a me personal list, so.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. I can vouch off this. Yeah.
The original is a horror thriller psychological movie where it's like, oh, what's happening to all the women of the city?
Right.
And so they took that concept and turned it into a comedy. So, completely twisting the vision of the original, this new comedy version of the Stepford Wives is a lot easier to grasp than the original, because the original is very, very, very dated. It's heavily rooted in its 70s culture. There's some movies that, like, you can watch that are from the 70s that kind of are timeless. This one's not.
Okay. I gotcha.
So, and the new one is very, very dated mid-2000s. So, it keeps that aspect, but taking a movie and completely changing its vision to tell the same story in a different way, I think is an interesting way to do a remake.
I agree, and I know that there's a lot of movies that have success off of that.
Yeah.
One that comes to mind when I'm thinking about it is actually The Longest Yard. If you watch the original Longest Yard, yeah, there's you might laugh at one or two things, but it's actually much more dramatic than the Adam Sandler version. The Adam Sandler version is much funnier.
It's balls to the wall comedy.
It's balls to the wall comedy, has a lot of humor, has a lot of faces you'll recognize, kind of thing. And you know what? I actually think the Adam Sandler version works better. That's one time you're going to hear me compliment Adam Sandler and post anger management and actually mean it. I think Longest Yard, in a lot of capacities, actually outdoes its original.
Okay.
Because I think that there's so much more just going on. I don't know if it's necessarily like just because of the flip, because of the being more dramatic to a more comedy feel. I think also what's happening with it is that, like, this was made for a culture in the 1970s, which this is made for a culture in the 2000s.
Yep.
And that
it's just the same kind of story with Stepford Wives.
Exactly. So when you flipped it to that 2000, it just speaks to a whole different volume because it's re-entering your generation, and then you have access to something that's kind of fresh, even though it's completely not fresh.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
It's a timeless story retold for a new audience.
Exactly.
And that can either work to your advantage or it can completely kill a franchise, a la The Mummy.
That one's a complicated one, that we both were just talking about before we got started on this one.
It's how do you reboot a franchise when there's two franchises you're rebooting?
Yeah, then that's kind of the confusion in that one, is the fact that, like, The Mummy is a classic horror element.
Yeah, the Boris Karloff one is a cinematic classic. It's one of the staples of the Universal movie monsters.
Absolutely. It is an icon, not only in the movie world, but as an icon in the literary world. It is an icon, and just everyone's collective of horror is where it is. And then, like, you have this reboot that happens.
Are we going to talk about the 90s one or the new one?
I was going to talk about the new one and then go back to the 90s one, is what I was thinking. But yeah, you have this new one that's trying to reboot this classic, and this is where I'm coming in with it, that shares its title with a reboot from the same studio, but the reboot from the 90s isn't exactly a reboot of that. It's just using the
key bits to make
monster.
it a story.
Yeah, it's using the monster.
Yeah, and the 90s one works.
The 90s one is arguably one of the best adventure series outside of Indiana Jones.
That's what they were going for. They wanted to make Indiana Jones with a horror movie monster.
Yeah, and that's they did it. They did it.
Yeah.
They made a great franchise.
It's a great adventure movie with, like, a movie monster, and it's hilarious. It's fun. Brendan Fraser made that movie work.
Yep, that's the movie I thought everyone, like, on the planet was like, Brendan Fraser's going to be a star. Look at this.
And he was for a while, and then things happened, and We're with you, Brendan Fraser. We're with you.
Yeah. But yeah, it was one of those franchises that was just massive. It was awesome. And everyone knows it. Everyone knows it. I think that's the important element that you have to say when you talk about the remake of The Mummy that came out just
Tom Cruise.
Tom Cruise 1 or 2 years ago.
It's last year.
Last year. It was just last year.
It's just last year.
Oh my gosh. That film is a flop.
Oh, it was so bad. I saw it when it came out on DVD because I didn't want to pay to see it in theaters.
Yep, and one of the reasons it's such a big flop is because no one coming into the movie knew which one it was going to be.
And the previews didn't really tell you either.
No.
All you knew was it's going to be dark and gray.
And it was going to be...
it's going to have Tom Cruise.
Yep, it didn't look like... It was like War of the Worlds meets the Mummy franchise almost at the time.
Yeah, because you see female mummy running down the street and then throwing a big wad of glass sand. And then the face in the wall of fog... because that was taken straight out of a 90s movie. And then you have him descending into the catacomb with the mummy. And so it felt like it's going to be the 90s one in some places, but then it has the early 30s version, and it's just like, what are you going for?
What is your intention here? And that's what we kind of just I felt like everyone just kind of got a little confused coming out of it, and no one really knew what to expect. And it was a failed reboot because of that, because they never advertised it clearly. Now, also, it's not a good movie.
It's not a good movie either.
It's not a good movie either, yeah.
For a blockbuster, we're going to make this big action franchise series, which they're still going for. Bride of Frankenstein comes out, I think, next year.
Yeah, they're trying to push it because they want something to compete with the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
And
it's
just not working.
Yeah. I'm not playing.
Waiting for Bride of Frankenstein to flop, and then Invisible Man gets canceled.
Yeah, I mean, that's to be expected, kind of thing.
But I've never seen a more boring blockbuster.
Yeah,
it was just boring. I nearly fell asleep while watching it, and I was watching it in the middle of the day. I had a cup of coffee. I'm over here. Let's watch The Mummy. It's gonna be.
It's gonna be
But so I've never watched a movie that I've been like, okay, I'm gonna give this movie its honest chance, and then just be, yep, that's exactly what I was expecting.
Yeah, it was one of those experiences. I just remember the biggest thing when you watched it, and you were telling me about when you were watching it by yourself. It's like, David, I hate this movie. If I have to see another camel spider, I'm going to just break my television or something like that.
The thing is there wasn't that many camel spiders. I think that looking back, there's only one scene with the spiders. They when I went into it, I was told, "Oh, they replaced the scarabs from the '90s movie with camel spiders." And I'm like, "Well, that's gonna horrify me. I'm arachnophobic." So there was one scene. There was one scene with spiders. That was it. You know what the worst part was? Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde.
Yeah, which is the other classic that's coming around.
Well, they put him in the movie.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, that was Russell Crowe.
Yeah, that's right. I was about to say that. Yep. Oh my god. This is one of those movies I put out of my mind because of its I sat and watched it and I was like, and it's gone forever kind of thing. Yep. Which happens. I feel like when you have movies like this that are just hardcore flops. Yeah.
It's a tough movie to talk about.
More or less, yeah, I will agree with you on that.
Yeah.
One more that I just kind of want to touch on, and I think we'll have to wrap it up. I don't know. We still got a little more time, I think, actually, depending on how long we talk about this one. Have you ever seen the original Rollerball?
No.
You have not seen the original
I've not even seen the remake.
The remake. Okay, that one is okay.
It's one of those, I know that it's a remake, but it's one of those, why?
Why is a great question, because Chris Klein is not good in this at all. He's the most boring lead actor on the planet. And what makes this even worse is Rollerball is not that good of an original movie from the 1970s anyway. But the movie had themes about class and class warfare and just the influence of sport almost in a gladiator type sense and this craziness. And then you have the remake, which is has exited all of the themes. Like, you took a bad movie and any piece of art and any, like, gripping piece of human, like, connection we have to it, you just lopped that off and said, we're going to make this about rollerball, and we're gonna do some stuff, you know?
We're going to make this into a sport movie.
It's going to make it into a sport movie that's not, like, a sport that you actually know or anything like that.
It's like Quidditch, the movie.
It was, yeah, exactly. It was like if they made Quidditch the movie. So you got some cool motorcycles jumping over stuff, and you got all these characters who were extremely one-note and awful. It is one of the worst reboots ever, not only because it is a bad movie, but because they rebooted a bad movie. I can't even think of another example of that in all of movie history where you rebooted a bad movie and thought, gee, this will be brilliant.
Well,
I personally just can't have one pop in my head. Where
I'm not having any pop in my head either. It's one of those things that it's rarely done. If you're going to remake something bad, you should make it good.
You should just completely destroy everything about that first movie. And it's like, all right, we just really thought this concept was cool. Now we're going to do something totally different. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm gonna jump in here now. I'm gonna push some buttons. So there was a movie that came out last year that was praised by a lot of people. It got great reviews, and I couldn't stand it. It's the remake of Beauty and the Beast.
Oh.
Turning an animated classic into Emma Watson auto-tuned.
Time out. Before we get started on this, let me just say this. The Disney live-action reboots are a terrible idea upon themselves.
Yes.
I hate the fact that people are wanting to do this.
Yes.
Because people are paying and they're wanting to do this, and they're like, yeah, more, because Cinderella rocked the house box office-wise when it came out.
Yep.
And it was very...
Cinderella was okay.
Of
movies to remake, that one's fine.
I feel like that's a movie that you can redo over and over and over again.
Well, it's a timeless story.
Exactly. And
they can't do Snow White.
So
why not Cinderella?
Yeah. That being said, like, some that, you probably get a lesser remake.
Maleficent was...
Yeah.
But they were trying to do something different. They were telling the story from a different perspective.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea, and that you get away with it on that.
Pete's Dragon, they completely changed the story. Same name, different story.
Yeah, but the one that worked, the remake of that series that worked, but I feel at the same time, like, it's just kind of... I don't know why we had to remake it, was Jungle Book.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, good director.
John Favreau's amazing.
Yeah, good work on that. Won awards for visual effects. Yeah. Like
it's beautiful. It's a beautiful, beautiful movie.
Yep. The story is still comprehensive in every way possible. It is totally watchable. There is nothing wrong with the capacity of it.
I was bored the whole time personally, but
while I'm sitting there watching it, I'm just sitting there going, I just don't get why they remade this.
No.
Yeah, because...
Why are they remaking Lion King?
Why are they remaking this? Yeah, Lion King is going to be a totally different... Oh my gosh. It's like, there's nothing live action about an all CGI movie, I'm just saying. Yeah, that's called animation, and very good animation at that point, in my opinion.
They're trying to get photorealistic.
Yeah, it's... yeah, I'm gonna just... No, but yeah, no, that's just me.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to go see it, but Beauty and the Beast.
Yes, to that topic. Sorry.
When we get to Beauty and the Beast, this is like the 4th or 5th Disney remake or so.
Yeah, so it's still in this genre.
It's the 5th, because there's Pete's Dragon and the other ones before that.
Yeah.
So, with Beauty and the Beast, Disney's been doing this for a little bit. It looks pretty. It's, for the most part, it's a beautiful movie. The costume design was nominated for an Oscar. None of the original songs were. Because, the original score for Beauty and the Beast is fantastic.
No,
it's some of the best songs penned for a movie.
Beauty and the Beast is one of the best animated features ever made, and
it's
the Academy agrees with that.
Yeah, it was nominated for Best Picture, the first first animated movie to be nominated.
Yeah. For
a reason. It's just wonderful. And so when you take this 75, 80-minute movie and stretch it to 2.5 hours...
Yeah.
You lose the compression that made it better.
The containment of what made it a loving, warm, just embrace, and easy to embrace comedy musical. And what Beauty and the Beast is just... the animated feature collects that perfectly. Yeah.
At the same time, when you transferred it to stage, the stage production is wonderful. Because when the music that they added worked. It stayed in the same world. This new music doesn't. I don't know what happened in 20 years that took them so far away from
the original idea of this great story. Yeah.
To randomly throw in a book that teleports you anywhere you want to go. Well, that would have solved everything for her at the last half of the movie.
Right? Like, no problems would have existed in the least bit.
Take me to my father. Whoom! I'm there.
Ta-da! This is a hot mess. Like,
Why does Gaston need to try and kill Maurice on his own? There's no reason for these scenes. There's not, we get Gaston's the bad guy. We don't need him to try and kill people.
Yeah, it's just, yeah. One of the things about, actually Gaston for me, when I watched the original, I loved him. I loved him until he turned into a complete jerk at the end. He was already a jerk.
He was a jerk, but, he wasn't a straight-up murderer.
Yeah.
He was just trying to hunt a monster.
Yeah.
That's all he was doing. He was hunting a monster to save the girl he loved.
Yeah. And that in his envision, that meant he was right. He wasn't a cold-blooded murderer in the first one.
Well, he turned into one by the end, because he knew that the beast was intelligent, he knew that it was a person.
Yeah.
But he still wanted to murder him.
Yes, I know what you're saying,
yeah. But the new Gaston isn't fun.
No.
The new music is terrible. I hated Nevermore so much, or Forevermore, or whatever it's called.
The song.
Yeah. Days in the Sun. Copyright. None of the music is fun. They've taken out the fun of Beauty and the Beast.
They did.
And they replaced it with actors who are great in different roles. In this one, they're underutilized in good ways. The special effects are fine, but...
They're still front and center. Yeah.
There's nothing good to add to this movie. There's nothing good added to this movie.
No.
And the scenes that they, remake are done worse.
In a lot of ways, yes. I can think of just, one example where I thought something was an interesting idea, but, that was it. It was the ballroom scene where you got to see the trumpets on the wall, playing the music and things like that. I thought that was
nice.
kind of interesting because that did play with the world, and it kind of explained where the music was coming from for this, dance that they were having. Outside of that, nothing. I agree.
I will say there's one thing that they did in this movie that wasn't in the original that I appreciated, which was when the pedal fell, everyone died. But because that was
very convincing. Yeah,
because I'm just oh, we're going here. I know where the story's going, but we're going here.
We're going pure death in this.
Okay.
Oh yeah, no, definitely a different little take.
Oh god, I just remember the Enchantress being all through the whole movie. That wasn't necessary. Oh god, it's one of those movies. Why?
Yeah, it's definitely one of those movies where we just ask that question over and over and over again. Oh my goodness. Well, this was your week to go and individually review a movie.
Yep. I said last week I was going to see Princess Mononoke.
Yes.
I didn't get a chance to, but luckily I have it on DVD.
Yeah, since this was a Fathom event, you already had the material fresh at hand. And I actually got to sit in on it.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
You had never seen this before.
No, I had never seen it before. I'm one of those that, Japanese animation is something that I have learned to, take in more as my life has gone on.
Yeah.
I don't know why that is. Dragon Ball Z was maybe the extent of it as a kid, but I never really watched the Toonami features that came on Fridays every now and then. But this was different to me.
Princess Mononoke is a very interesting story, just because it's a nice battle between technology and nature.
Yeah.
And that's the extent of the story. It's an epic story of gods versus man.
Yeah.
And then just going at it nonstop.
It's definitely, yeah. That's a common theme, and good bless
Miyazaki.
Miyazaki's films are centered around that, and pacifism also is another one, which is why you're seeing the main character's actions in this.
And he's very pacifistic. He's very, I'm not on your side, I'm not on their side, I'm just wanting peace between the two of you.
Yeah. Which is interesting because that's something we don't get a lot of in American film.
No.
Yeah.
And he's a very compelling lead character. That said, he doesn't do much for a large part of the movie. Because there's, I got shot, now I'm going to be passed out for a little bit.
Yeah.
But the animation is breathtaking. Some great work all throughout the movie. You, who've never seen the movie before, what were your aspects? Because I love this movie. I think this is, I'm not going to say it's Miyazaki's best, just because I have other movies that I love more than this one.
I did look up a little bit about it, about how other people have perceived it, and this is a very common one for a lot of people to like from Miyazaki.
Yeah, it was called his masterpiece before Spirited Away.
Yeah, this is good. I agree. It is an epic in every sense of the word, except it's less than 4 hours.
Yeah, it's over 2 hours, which for an animated movie is kind of rough.
Yeah. It's it's less than 2 hours for it, or it's over 2 hours, and it's very, very there's a very well thought out story going on. Mm-hmm. It's got a very clear message to it. I was impressed by the voice actors that they got on board for this.
Especially for the 90s when voice acting for animated movies wasn't a big thing, and especially for dubbing,
especially for a non-Disney or Warner Brothers production. Yeah,
because this was the English dub was done by Miramax.
Yeah, and Miramax had Billy Bob Thornton in this, Minnie Driver, those names.
Billy Crudup.
Yeah, we know these people in this, and it was I was very impressed with that. The story captivated me. I was just very interested the entire time. It's just because this is a world that I got a fresh taste of fantasy that I had never experienced. So it was, it's definitely a movie that I would recommend to a lot of people. And I'm not even going to try to dive into describing the plot because it's just one of those films that you have to sit and you have to assess it and just take it all in.
And one of the fun things about it is that both sides are right in their own ways.
Yes.
And that's hard to do in a movie.
Where you have a harder time picking sides.
Yeah, and with it being in an animated movie, it's not aimed at kids. This is not a kid's movie in any way.
That's the interesting thing about this, yeah.
And so for an animated movie to be, okay, here's humans being humans. Mm-hmm. We're just trying to live. And here's nature being, hey, we're trying to live too and you're killing us.
Yes.
Which side do you side with? Do you side with your people or do you side with nature? And you can't. You have to side with both. In the end.
You have to find a very, eastern part of this, but there's a balance. There's a center point. And that is the lesson in this, and it's very, very interesting.
Arguably, you could say that Lady Ayaboshi, who's the leader of the town that's fighting most of the nature, is the villain.
Yes.
But she's also helping lepers. She's putting people to work. She's reinvigorating this entire town.
Yeah, and she's also casting away feudalism and things that are oppressing people.
Yeah, and she's also going into brothels and saving women from having to sell themselves for sex.
So you're having a very complicated character in one corner, and then on the other side you have the people fighting for, or not the people, the gods of the forest, fighting for nature. Fighting for the existence of animals and the natural world, but at the same time
trying to keep what power they have, because as they lose their power, they're becoming stupider and more domesticated.
Yes, and as that's going on, you have this whole they're not right because the entire time they're never wanting to bring humans in to coexist or any way in any capacity. So it's just it's a very unbalanced world having to become balanced, and that's just an interesting film, something that we don't get a lot of, and I definitely liked it.
That I was a little nervous for you going in on this one, just because I was like, I'm not sure how you were going to take this one. So
I had to sit there and I had to digest it. Don't get me
Yeah.
wrong, I had to digest it, but it's a film worth digesting.
Yes.
Because when you take it all in and you watch at your own pace. Yeah. But yeah, that's what I got to say on that one.
yeah, I think that's enough to say about that one.
So next week when it's my turn to go review a film, I am going with my fiance since it's her birthday. And so we're going to find one out at random.
Hooray!
So she gets to pick the film because it's her birthday. So we'll find out what we got to watch. And I'll get a real quick breakdown review on that, down and dirty. But
I'm excited. I'm excited because tomorrow I'm going to get to see Mamma Mia.
oh boy.
Here we go again.
Which actually is doing pretty well in the box office.
It's doing well critically, too.
Yes.
It has a 70-something%.
Yep, and the only movie it lost out to, it was The Equalizer 2 on its opening weekend.
Yeah, and that's Denzel. So.
Yeah, and that one's doing garbage with critics. So, oh well. So yeah, no, Mamma Mia is doing well, and I think it's probably going to be worth checking out. I definitely think so. So that'll be fun. On our YouTube page, we are going to have a review for Unfriended Dark Web coming pretty soon, and we'll let you know when that comes out. So it may not be between this podcast and the next one, but we will let you know on that one as quickly as possible.
As soon as we know when it's up, you will know when it's up. So
So definitely check us out on Twitter. We'll let you know when it's up on there. That's at Lonesome Sunday.
All right. Well, we'll see you guys in the next one, and y'all have a good one.
All right, see ya.
Bye.
Thanks for checking out our podcast. For more reviews and the latest news on upcoming projects, be sure to follow us at Lonesome Sunday on Twitter or visit our YouTube channel, Lonesome Sunday Pictures.